Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. You know, I'm amazed and really blessed by the fact that we have so many instruments that we can learn how to play. And I've made a collection of instruments through the years. And I'm going to show you some penny whistles to begin with because they're so much fun to play and they are a woodwind and they're not hard to play. And I was introduced to them by a good friend of mine who's a flute player, and we were playing in the same orchestra, and she was sitting beside me and she brought in one of the penny whistles. They're also called Irish flutes, and they're made in Great Britain, by the way. And I looked at it, and she says, "You ought to buy one of these, Pat. They're a lot of fun to play, and they're easy to play, too." Now, she's a flute player like myself. And so the next day, I went to a local music store, and I bought a few of them because they come in different keys and they're just amazingly simple to play, and they play a lot of music. And a lot of times you will see them in orchestras doing solo parts. So I'm going to show you a few, and just so you can see what they're like. They are made out of metal, and they have a plastic top. The ones that I have were made in Great Britain, and they're called generation flutes. I sometimes call them Irish flutes because they play a lot of Irish music, and they do so very well. So let me introduce them to you one by one. Here's one. They're all metal with plastic tops. They have different colored brass, and they have different colored plastic tops. So here's one in the key of D. And, oh, I'm sorry, this is in the key of E flat. Let me just play a few notes on it so you can get an idea as to what they're like. They tend to be a metallic sound and a little squealy. Very easy to play. You don't have to really know a whole lot. You have to have some kind of an idea as to how to blow into an instrument, because these basically have fipple mouthpieces, and you can see there's a labium right here, or an aperture right here, and it's right on the mouthpiece itself. There's no tone hole in the back, however. The back is very just plain, and no place that for you to put your fingers, but like any other woodwind, you put your left hand on top, you put your right hand on the bottom, you put your thumbs in back. There's no special place, but the thumbs are going to fall within a certain distance because of the shape of your hand, so it's going to be right. That's the E flat. I want to show you the D. I used to play a lot in the key of D. Now you notice they get a little squealy on the top, but that's just the nature of the instrument. You can pay a lot of money. These, on the average, cost me probably about $7 or $8 a piece. The big ones maybe a little more, but they didn't cost a whole lot. You can pay for hundreds of dollars for very, very nice penny whistles, and they have a little better tone. But for the kind of playing I do and the solo work I do, these work out just fine. So let me try. This is a key of C. You'll notice they're getting a little larger. And the same thing, a brass bottom, blue plastic top, no tone hole, fipple mouthpiece. So I'll try this. Now the finger stretches are going to get a little bit larger as we go along here. I used to play these in an orchestra. I used to bring them in and play them occasionally. And I would tell the pastor, woodwinds are so simple. You put them in your mouth and they play. And basically these do. Now I want to show you the B flat. Notice it's even larger. Same design. And it is a bigger hand stretch, so it's getting a little bit harder to play if you have problems with hand stretchers. Now you're going to notice that the tone is going to be deeper, and that's because the tube is longer. It's going to be a little harder to get notes because your finger stretches are going to be a little bit longer, but that's because the tube is longer and your hand has to be accommodated and the holes have to be in exactly the right place, or you don't get the tone that you want. This is a little harder to play, but I do a lot with it, and I have done a lot with it. Now I want to do some of the smaller ones. This is also in the key of D. I brought it in. I did play one a little earlier here today, but I wanted to bring this in because it's got a brassy gold color and a green top. The instruments that you get that are penny whistles are all brass, and then, or at least for the most part, they're brass. And then they have just a plain tube that's going to be either goldish or silver, and then the plastic top. And the plastic tops that I have are either blue, green, or red. So let me just run through this. Here it is. The smaller tube is going to make it higher pitched. And a little squealy on the top. That's just the nature of the instrument. Now, I want to show you two of the smaller ones, and I think I'll take the F first. This is in the key of F. It's small, brass-colored, red top to it. Same design, Fipple mouthpiece, aperture or labium on the top, no tone hole in the back, and it's going to be higher pitched, so get prepared for this. It's higher pitched because the tube is shorter. Now, I never use it for solo work, although I could, and the reason is because it is so high-pitched that some people might have trouble listening to it because they have ear problems, and sometimes I will warn people, this is a very small instrument, it's going to be high-pitched, it's going to be squealy, there's nothing I can do about that, that's just the nature of the instrument, so if you have ear problems, you may want to just kind of take and put your fingers in your ears so you don't hear too much. But this is the smallest one I have. It's in the key of G. And the same thing, brass color with a plastic top with the aperture right on the mouthpiece or the labium right on the mouthpiece. Very small, very high pitched. I used to kid people. I used to say I only play this for people that I don't like because it's so high-pitched and there's no way I can avoid it. That was a joke, of course, but I wouldn't use it for solo work. You notice how closely my fingers are together. Left hand on top, right hand on the bottom. But since the instrument is so small, these tone holes are very closely spaced, and some people would have a problem with this if they have larger fingers. I had a person tell me once, now I'm an ordained minister, and I had a person tell me once and say, you can't praise God with high instruments. And I said, just watch me. And I took this little guy out, and every song I could, I played it at the highest pitches I could possibly get it. And I know how to fudge instruments to have them play more than what they normally would play. And I got this so high, and it was on beautiful praise music. And I said, see, you can praise God with anything that you have. And this is one of the littlest ones. Now, the thing I really want to show you, and this is one that you're probably not familiar with. Take a look at this. It's a penny whistle. It's the biggest one made. It's called a low D penny whistle, and the reason it's called that is the fact that the notes are very, very low. Now you've got an instrument, I'll hold it up like this, and show you the front of it. The tone holes, I can see them on the monitor, but they may be a little hard because it's all black. Fipple mouthpiece on top. This is a little adjustable. I can twist and turn this and get this a little bit longer if I want it to be even lower, if it's a little out of pitch. But the thing is, with these instruments, you can't sharpen them, because if you get them in place the way that they're made, they won't go any shorter, so therefore you can't raise the pitch. You can lower the pitch if you want to unscrew this and make the tube a little longer. Now, I don't do much work with it, because if you look at the finger stretches, they're so big between the fingers that there's no way I'm going to be able to play a scale. I used to be able to do it, but as I'm getting older and my fingers get more arthritis and my joints have more arthritis, I can't do it anymore. When I got this instrument, one of the guys that sent it to me in the company said, okay, Pat, if you really can't play it and you don't want to keep it, we will accept it back. So if you find it's just too much. And what he was talking about was the finger stretches on it. It's very easily playable, and of course I would never send it back. Once it's in my care, once I bought it, it belongs to me, and it's one of my show instruments, and I'm never going to let it go. It has a beautiful tone. See, I can't get it low because my fingers can't stretch that well. But it's a beautiful instrument, and I have used it, and sometimes I bring it to conferences that I teach, because a lot of times I do demonstrations on instruments and do seminars on them and so forth, and I always bring it because it's fascinating. People have never seen it, and they don't know what it is. The same with the bass recorders and some of the other larger instruments. But some of the other larger instruments have keys. So with the keys, you can have a key and it makes your fingers closer together, and then rods and pads and keys operate. They go up and down and close the tone holes that you can't reach. And that would be true of the bass. I don't have any trouble playing the bass. But there's no keys, no rods, no pads, nothing here, no cork. And the beauty of these instruments, the penny whistles, the recorders, is you can just pick them up and play them. You don't have to worry about springs and rods and pads, and if a spring is out of a little nook it's supposed to be in. I had a saxophone, a soprano saxophone, and one of the little springs, it was only like about 3/4 of an inch long or less, and it got out of a little tiny notch that it was supposed to be in. It didn't want to play. And I was supposed to do a solo on it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I've got to force it to play, and it doesn't want to. What's wrong with it? And I looked at it, and there it was. I could see that little tiny spring out of its little notch. So I took a fingernail, and I just guided it back to where it was supposed to be, got it in the notch it was supposed to be, and the instrument was fine. So instruments get complicated, and it doesn't take much to get them off. With an instrument like this, with the penny whistles and recorders, you almost can't defeat them. They're going to play, they're made to play, and there's nothing that can possibly go wrong with them, except if you put them in hot water in order to disinfect them. I was teaching at a school, and the teacher said, well, we've got to disinfect these instruments. It was just the beginning of September, and he'd asked me to go in once a week to teach the children music. It was a private school, and I'd agreed to do that. He says, I have a group of instruments here, but there seems to be something wrong with them. They were twisted, they were bent, they looked horrible. I says, what happened to these? And he said, well, I decided to disinfect them. So I put them in boiling water. Well, boiling water in plastic, I don't know what he was thinking, and of course it destroyed the instruments. But if you keep your instrument well, keep it in room temperature and don't do anything unusual for it, some of these instruments will last for years and years. So those are the penny whistles. Next segment, I'm going to show you the Sassoto flutes, which are similar. So we've been talking about instruments, we've been talking about how to finger notes, and I want to go on with that today. And I brought back my little tube. I did this little tube to make it easier, I hope, for people to learn how to finger instruments. Left on top, B, A, G. and right on the bottom, F, or you can do F this way, E and D, and the lowest one on C. I wrote this all out. So if we look here at this diagram, this would be your B, A, and G, and I've got that labeled out. But this note, this tone hole, is also used in playing A and D and C. And then the B and the G's is what these do. And then if you look at your right hand, where your right hand would be, this is F, E, and D, but this is also used in playing F, and this is your low C. So this is what it is. In the back, you have your thumb hole. Now, what I've done, and I think I have time to do this, but I'm not sure, but I may as well try it. I made out a whole set of new pictures that I drew of the instruments, of the recorders. These would be where your fingers would go, and this would be the tone hole in the back. So starting with B, and I've drawn it so that you can see the tone hole in the back and the tone hole in the front. So starting with B, because as I've taught you before, and let me just review this, this is, that's 6 notes in the scale, and there are only 8 notes in an octave, so I decided to do a new fingering chart based on this diagram. So let me just go over this. This is going to be your B, and your B is here on the staff, the 3rd line up. And you have your first note covered and the thumb hole covered. This, of course, is the top of the instrument, the mouthpiece, the labium. This would be the bottom. And you notice there are 2 little dots here. A lot of the instruments, the newer instruments, have 2 little holes in the back, in the bottom, and that's so you can play your sharps and flats. Not all instruments have that, but the newer ones do. So that's B. When you get to A, you add another finger. And here's the A on the staff. It's 1 below that B, and the thumb hole is closed, just these top 2. That's the A. Let me see here if I can get these to turn right. Whoops. I'll get it at some point. This is the G, the next one down. You add another finger. These 3 are on the left hand, tone hole closed, and this is where it appears on the staff. Now, I did add this so you could see where the positions of the fingers would be for those notes, so I just added that, but I haven't filled it in for the most part. I do have a couple where it is filled in, like, for example, this F. F are these 4 fingers. And this is left open, but if you have a Baroque instrument, then you add that. So F, in the case of a Baroque instrument, and you would know that because on the back of your instrument there would be a little B right above the thumb hole or right below the thumb hole, just a tiny B. That tells you it's a Baroque instrument. So B, A, G, F, and if it's a Baroque instrument, you add that other finger. If it's not a Baroque instrument, it's just these 4, and the thumb hole is closed. And I forgot to put the note in, but the note is going to be on that first space. And if it's on the top, if it's a higher F, it'll be on that first line. I'll fix that later. I forgot to do that. Then you get to the E. It's B, A, G, F, E. And the E is here on the staff. It's lower still. The more tone holes you have covered, the lower that it gets. And that's the E. And I drew it this way so you could see where the fingers are, and I also drew it so you could see the tone hole in the back, the thumb hole. Then the D, B, A, G, F, E, D. Thumb hole is still closed. There's been no change. And here the note is on the staff. Now, we could go to the higher octaves. This is a low C. Everything's covered. Everything is completely covered. All of the notes are covered. I'm watching my time here. And then you have another octave. Here's your C. This is your C, mid-range C, and it's right here. and then you have your thumb hole covered. Now when you get to the higher notes, and I think what I'll do is I'm going to continue this next segment because we're beginning to run out of time, but when you get to the higher notes, which will start with D, then D has no thumb hole covered, and when you get to the E above that, you start half-holing the thumb hole. So here's the thumb hole. Instead of covering the whole thing, I've covered half of it. That would indicate that you are half-holing that note. And when you half-hole that note, that will automatically get you to an octave for most notes. Now, it's not true for every single note, but it's true for most notes. So we are just about out of time, and I really can't finish this, so I'm going to continue with it next time. So please join me then, and we'll continue this.